Welcome to World Prism. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. In a landmark decision, a federal court has overturned California's long-standing ban on firearm magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. This ruling comes after years of heated legal battles and public debate, and it marks a significant shift in the ongoing national conversation about gun rights and regulation. The court's decision is being closely watched not only in California, but across the country, as it could have far-reaching implications for similar laws in other states. For Second Amendment advocates, this is a major victory. Outside the courthouse, supporters cheered and held signs, celebrating what they see as a restoration of constitutional rights. Many believe this decision reaffirms the fundamental right to keep and bear arms, and sets a powerful precedent for future legal challenges. The case at the center of this decision, Duncan v. Bonta, directly challenges whether states have the authority to restrict what many consider common and widely used firearm components, all in the name of public safety. The plaintiffs argued that such restrictions unfairly target law-abiding citizens, while doing little to prevent crime or enhance safety. In its ruling, the court found California's arguments for the ban unpersuasive. The judge stated that while public safety is an important concern, it cannot override the clear constitutional right to bear arms as protected by the Second Amendment. The decision emphasized that the state failed to provide sufficient evidence that the ban would actually reduce gun violence or save lives. Gun owners and advocates argue that magazines capable of holding more than 10 rounds are standard equipment for millions of Americans. They are used for lawful self-defense, recreational shooting, and competitive sports, not just by the military or law enforcement. Many believe that restricting access to these magazines unfairly penalizes responsible gun owners. The court's decision frames standard capacity magazines as integral to the function of modern firearms and therefore protected by the Second Amendment. Legal experts note that this interpretation could influence how courts view similar restrictions in other states, potentially reshaping the legal landscape for gun owners nationwide. California officials have already signaled their intent to appeal the decision, which could send the case all the way to the Supreme Court. If that happens, the outcome could set a binding precedent for every state in the nation, determining how far states can go in regulating firearms and their components. As the legal battle continues, the outcome of this case could redefine the boundaries of gun rights and influence firearm policy nationwide, shaping the future of the Second Amendment for generations to come. At the heart of Duncan versus Bonta is California's law banning magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. The law aimed to reduce mass shooting lethality, but gun owners argue it criminalizes standard equipment for common firearms. Plaintiffs say millions of these magazines are in lawful use nationwide, and the ban undermines self-defense. The law also forced owners to surrender or destroy their magazines without compensation, raising constitutional concerns under the Fifth Amendment. The case questions whether banning such widely owned items is an overreach of government power. California argued that large-capacity magazines are not essential for self-defense and are often used in violent crimes, classifying them as accessories outside Second Amendment protection. The state cited historical regulations of dangerous weapons to justify the ban. Plaintiffs countered that magazines are integral to modern firearms and are overwhelmingly owned for lawful purposes, making them protected arms. Dissenting judges argued the state failed to show any historical precedent for banning such common components. The debate centers on whether these magazines are protected arms or merely dangerous accessories. In 2022, the Supreme Court issued a landmark decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, fundamentally altering the way courts across the country evaluate gun laws. Before Bruin, judges often weighed the government's interest in public safety against the rights of individuals to bear arms, using a balancing test that considered modern needs and circumstances. But Bruin replaced that approach with a much stricter rule. Now, for any gun regulation to stand, courts must find a clear historical analog from the nation's founding era, essentially a law or practice from the late 1700s or early 1800s that is similar in purpose and scope. This means that courts can no longer simply argue that a law is justified because it might make communities safer. Instead, they must look back in time and ask, did lawmakers at the founding enact something similar? If not, the regulation is likely to be struck down, regardless of its effectiveness or popularity today. The Ninth Circuit, which covers much of the western United States, was forced to apply this new historical test in the high-profile case of Duncan versus Bonta, which challenged California's ban on high-capacity magazines. Instead of focusing on whether the ban reduced gun violence, the court had to dig into centuries-old laws and practices. California's lawyers scoured history books, searching for examples of early American bans on dangerous and unusual weapons, hoping to show that restrictions on certain types of arms have deep roots. Meanwhile, the plaintiffs argued that there was no historical precedent for banning magazines commonly used by law-abiding citizens. The Bruin test has created a wave of legal uncertainty, as judges now must become amateur historians, interpreting centuries-old statutes and debates. Unsurprisingly, this has led to sharp disagreements among courts and legal scholars about what the historical record actually shows. In Duncan, both sides pored over the same historical documents but reached starkly different conclusions, highlighting just how subjective and complex this new standard can be. As a result, the Bruin standard has become the central battleground in Second Amendment litigation nationwide, reshaping debates over gun rights and regulations in every corner of the country. The legal battle over California's magazine ban began in 2019, marking the start of a complex and closely watched constitutional fight. At the heart of the case was a law that limited the capacity of firearm magazines, a measure California argued was necessary for public safety. But gun owners and advocacy groups challenged the law, claiming it violated the Second Amendment rights of citizens across the state. In a landmark decision, Judge Roger Benitez of the U.S. District Court struck down the magazine ban, declaring it unconstitutional. His ruling emphasized the importance of individual rights and set off a wave of reactions from both supporters and critics of the law. The state of California quickly appealed the decision, sending the case to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Initially, a three-judge panel sided with Judge Benitez, agreeing that the ban infringed on constitutional protections. However, the legal tide shifted when a larger en banc panel of the Ninth Circuit reviewed the case. This time, the majority reversed the earlier decision, upholding the magazine ban and arguing that the law was consistent with historical firearm regulations. The legal landscape changed dramatically after the Supreme Court's landmark Bruin ruling, which established a new historical standard for evaluating Second Amendment cases. As a result, the Supreme Court sent Duncan versus Bonta back to the lower courts, instructing them to reconsider the case in light of this new precedent, focusing on the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Judge Benitez once again found the magazine ban unconstitutional, reaffirming his earlier stance and reigniting the debate over gun rights and public safety. Yet, the Ninth Circuit's en banc panel again reversed his decision, this time citing historical tradition as justification for upholding the law, deepening the divide among judges and legal scholars. The decision sparked fiery dissents from several judges, who accused the majority of misapplying the Supreme Court's guidance in Bruin and failing to protect fundamental constitutional rights. Now, the plaintiffs have formally petitioned the Supreme Court to review the case, hoping for a definitive ruling that could impact gun laws nationwide. As the case's long and winding journey continues, all eyes are on the nation's highest court, where a final decision could reshape the future of Second Amendment rights in America. If the Supreme Court hears Duncan versus Bonta, the decision will set a national precedent on magazine bans. About a dozen states have similar laws. A ruling could strike them down or uphold them nationwide. A circuit split, if another court rules differently, makes Supreme Court review more likely. The court could clarify whether magazines are protected arms and how to apply the Bruin standard. A ruling against the ban would expand gun rights and limit future restrictions. Upholding the ban would affirm states' authority to regulate firearm components for public safety. Either outcome will shape the American gun debate for years to come. Duncan v. Bonta is a pivotal case for the Second Amendment and gun regulation in America. It asks where government power to protect public safety ends and individual gun rights begin. Gun rights advocates see the case as a test of the Supreme Court's commitment to protecting effective self-defense. Gun control supporters argue that magazine bans are vital for reducing gun violence. The case's resolution will clarify constitutional limits on gun control and influence lawmakers and courts nationwide. Whether the Supreme Court intervenes or not, the outcome will mark a major chapter in the ongoing gun debate. The final decision will echo through American society for generations.